Ben Affleck has offered a measured assessment of artificial intelligence's place in filmmaking following his participation in a high-level gathering that included Star Wars producer Kathleen Kennedy and executives from several major technology and entertainment companies. Speaking while promoting an upcoming thriller, he described AI as a tool capable of reducing production costs and automating laborious visual tasks, yet fundamentally limited in its ability to replace genuine human creativity, taste, or storytelling. He compared current large language and video models to skilled craftsmen who can imitate existing patterns. Such systems work by organizing vast libraries of data into vectors of meaning and using transformers to interpret context. The result is the recombination of material that already exists. Nothing truly new is created. Affleck drew a distinction between craft, knowing how to execute a task, and art, which includes knowing when to stop and possessing the judgment that produces original work. AI, in his view, can generate imitative verse but cannot produce Shakespeare because it lacks that authentic artistic judgment. The comments came after reports that Affleck had attended a private AI-focused conference alongside Kathleen Kennedy and representatives from Meta, Google, Paramount, A24, Lucasfilm, and other entities. Attendees reportedly found him well-dressed, articulate, and willing to remain after his panel to continue conversations. The gathering itself fueled speculation about possible future collaborations, including potential involvement in projects connected to the Star Wars universe, though no concrete announcements have followed. Affleck's perspective reflects a broader industry conversation about the dual nature of AI tools. On one hand, the technology promises efficiency gains, faster generation of visual effects elements, automated assistance with editing or pre-visualization, and potential reductions in certain production expenses. On the other hand, concerns persist about the displacement of creative labor, the homogenization of output, and the loss of the human idiosyncrasies that often define memorable films. By framing AI as a craftsman rather than an artist, Affleck positions the technology as subordinate to human direction. The models can execute and recombine, but the decisions about what is worth making, when a work is finished, and how emotional or thematic resonance is achieved remain human responsibilities. This view allows for the adoption of useful tools while resisting the notion that machines will soon originate the stories or the sensibility that audiences seek. His upcoming project, an action thriller scheduled for release later in the year and co-starring Kerry Washington, arrives in a landscape already experimenting with AI-assisted workflows. How extensively such tools were or were not used in that production has not been detailed, but Affleck's public comments suggest a preference for human-centered creative control even as practical applications expand. The secretive nature of the conference itself illustrates the cautious approach many industry figures are taking. High-level discussions occur behind closed doors while public statements remain carefully calibrated. Affleck's willingness to articulate a clear philosophical boundary, AI as powerful imitator but not originator, provides one of the more direct statements from a major filmmaker on the subject. For younger filmmakers and technicians, the technology presents both opportunity and uncertainty. Mastery of new tools may become a competitive advantage, yet the core skills of storytelling, performance direction, and aesthetic judgment are likely to retain their value if Affleck's assessment proves accurate. Audiences, for their part, continue to respond most strongly to work that feels authored by distinct human sensibilities rather than by statistical recombination of prior material. Affleck's own career has spanned acting, writing, and directing, giving him practical familiarity with multiple stages of the filmmaking process. That range informs his comments. He understands both the repetitive technical labor that AI might usefully absorb and the irreducible creative decisions that define a film's identity. His analogy of the craftsman who knows how to work versus the artist who knows when to stop captures a distinction that many practitioners recognize from experience. As AI systems continue to improve in fluency and visual coherence, the boundary Affleck describes will be tested repeatedly. Each advance will prompt renewed debate about what constitutes originality and where human judgment remains essential. For the moment, his position offers a clear framework. Welcome the efficiency, reject the substitution of imitation for invention, and keep the final authority over story and taste in human hands. Article 7. Keke Palmer makes Tim. Keke Palmer has described an unconventional yet deliberate self-care practice that she considers essential to her well-being. She makes time to cry. In a conversation on a podcast hosted by Amy Poehler, the actress, singer, host, and mother explained that she cries alone quite often. Sometimes the tears come easily. At other times she consciously decides that it is time to cry. She values the privacy of the experience and actively holds space for it in her life. She frames crying as a necessary release of sadness that has been carried, sometimes for a day and sometimes for years. Emotions can linger in the mind even when they are not immediately visible. Allowing them to surface through tears brings them out of that internal storage and provides relief. Palmer presents the practice without apology or embarrassment, treating it as a practical tool rather than a sign of weakness. In addition to scheduled emotional release, she protects the first 5 hours of each morning for herself. During that window, she does whatever she chooses, free from external demands. The ritual, she has said in earlier interviews, helps her feel secure in herself because the activities are chosen solely for her own benefit. The combination of protected morning time and intentional crying forms part of a broader approach to maintaining equilibrium amid a demanding professional and personal life. Palmer's career encompasses multiple disciplines. She acts in film and television, records music, hosts programs, and raises a child. The overlapping responsibilities create a constant flow of obligations, public appearances, creative deadlines, and parental duties. In that context, deliberate practices that restore emotional and mental capacity become practical necessities rather than optional luxuries. She has also spoken about the value of ending relationships or associations that drain rather than support her. Cutting people off, she has noted, is an underrated wellness strategy. The ability to protect one's energy by removing sources of chronic stress complements the internal practices of solitude and emotional release. Taken together, these habits reflect a philosophy of active self-maintenance. Rather than waiting for burnout or emotional overload to force a crisis, Palmer builds regular opportunities for restoration into her routine. Crying is not treated as a failure of composure, but as a physiological and psychological mechanism that clears accumulated feeling. Morning solitude is not selfishness but a foundation that enables her to meet the rest of the day's demands more effectively. For many people who juggle similar loads, professional ambition, creative work, caregiving, the idea of scheduling time to cry may initially seem strange. Cultural messages often equate emotional control with strength and visible composure with competence. Palmer's openness challenges that equation by presenting vulnerability, when chosen and contained, as a form of strength. By crying alone, she retains privacy while still allowing the release. By deciding when to cry, she retains agency. The practice also acknowledges that emotional residue does not always announce itself on a convenient schedule. Feelings from the recent past or from much earlier experiences can surface unexpectedly or remain buried until given deliberate attention. Creating space for them prevents the gradual buildup that can otherwise erupt in less controlled ways or settle into chronic tension. Palmer's willingness to discuss these habits publicly offers a model of emotional literacy that contrasts with more performative versions of wellness. She does not present an idealized routine of perpetual positivity. Instead, she describes a realistic cycle that includes the acknowledgement and release of sadness as a normal and useful part of staying functional. In an industry that frequently demands constant visibility and emotional labor, protecting private time and private emotional processes becomes an act of self-preservation. The 5 morning hours and the solitary crying sessions are both boundaries that keep the external demands from consuming the internal resources required to meet them. As Palmer continues to navigate the overlapping roles of artist, public figure, and parent, these practices appear to function as stabilizers. They do not eliminate stress or sadness, but they provide reliable methods for processing both. The result is a sustainable approach to a life that shows little sign of slowing down. By making time to cry, she ensures that the emotions which inevitably arise have a designated place to go, leaving her better able to engage with everything else that follows.